Hello everyone and welcome back to Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth. This is part 2 of our episode book club of Bob Chipman's Super Mario Bros. 3 Brick by Brick. With me is Reese, Kay, and Conqy. We'll just pick up right where we left off on page 31, where we learned that Bob Chipman, the epic story of
into a pickle.
The epic story of Bob Chipman defeating his childhood psychologist.
Annihilating him.
So my next note is on page 33. This is where he starts to get into more of like the pop culture that he got into. So he's talking about the shitty movie The Wizard, which was like basically a feature-length commercial. For a bunch of Nintendo accessories, and specifically he says that Nintendo and the producers had a secret weapon. The first gameplay footage of Super Mario Bros. 3 would be revealed to Western audiences through this movie, and they made sure everyone knew about it. So on December 15th, 1989, me and hundreds of thousands of other kids across America lined up for The Wizard. I'll admit that I was among those who fooled themselves into thinking it was a great movie for years afterwards. But on that day, all we really wanted to see was Super Mario Bros. 3 in front of our eyeballs. Just let us see it. Please, just let us see it. So that's what he's talking about. But then later on he says, but the climactic reveal of Super Mario Bros. 3 is burned, no, seared into my memory. The way JFK's assassination was for my parents' generation, or the way 9/11 would be for mine a scant 12 years from then. My God, ellipses.
Yes.
Was it really only 12 years? So he's saying that the Super Mario Bros. 3 scene in The Wizard, the shitty movie from the late 80s, is seared into his brain the way the JFK assassination was for his parents and 9/11.
I mean, if Bob is implying that the CIA made The Wizard, then I agree.
Big
I just love it because, like, you know, he wasn't there for the JFK assassination, but he was there for 9/11. He's saying this from experience. These are equal events to him.
I just can't get my head around why is he comparing it to like two horrific things, two like tragedies basically. He can't think of something like positive. He could have said the moon landing. Or like
only Mario related things can be positive.
Have you seen The Wizard, Alton? Because in The Wizard, hundreds of thousands of people are killed on camera, and those are real deaths. So
yeah, it was unsimulated. They actually killed those people. It was kind of like the chariot chase scene in. I
have to confess, I have not watched The Wizard.
Wow, uncultured. First of all.
I know, right? I'm missing out like on a generational defining epoch like 9/11.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I mean, I did see. Listen, I did see the 9/11, so I guess I've kind of seen the ending of The Wizard.
Listen, this is not fair. Yes, 9/11 is a better movie than The Wizard. But The Wizard is a better movie than anything that came out on Netflix last year. I think we're being a little mean to The Wizard here.
There's a theme here that would go on for Bob's whole career to be a big theme in his life, not just in this book, I think, which is coping your way into thinking that something bad is good because you wanted it to be good. Like he admits readily in this that it wasn't a good movie, but he's like, but I insisted it was, you know, at the time.
Years.
And this will happen again in this book.
Bob really wanted The Wizard to be good. He wanted the Super Mario Brothers movie to be good, and he really wanted 9/11 to be good. I'm sorry, they were all bad.
Oh, fuck.
Exactly.
Even among children, they immediately forgot The Wizard and just played the video game.
Yeah.
But
like the thing that he really wants to stress in this, what he really misses from this era is that like all the other stupid children like him were just as excited for this bad movie as he was. And like everyone was caught up in like Mario mania like at the time. And then we'll get into this later, but like Conqy brought up the Super Mario Brothers movie, and I really hope that this is like what stuck with me after reading this. But the thing that he's like so disappointed in is that it does not have that same emotional zeitgeist of like obsession with what is clearly a horrible movie.
I don't understand the Mario Brothers movie point.
Yeah, because the Mario Brothers movie was good.
That.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we will get into that. I have another note on page 35. Do you guys have anything?
I got a 35.
Oh, I mean, let me get this one.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, a boy goes to war.
Jesus Christ, Bob.
So this is clearly him going to Desert Storm. It's in the 90s. Marketing, especially youth marketing in the 90s, was all about dividing and conquering, establishing an identity for your product, encouraging a less attractive identity for a rival product, and getting consumers to flock to you to claim that good identity for themselves. We got a taste of this in the 80s with the, quote, Cola Wars, and Nike essentially started a race war among my sports fans' friends by selling the Magic shoe and the Bird shoe concurrently at the height of the Celtics-Lakers rivalry.
I think you just live in the greater Boston metro area on that one.
Yeah, that's just people from Southie, Bob. That's how they are.
But he fucking compared like a shoe advertising campaign to a race war.
Yeah.
I mean,
that tracks with his comparisons up to this point.
This is like another thing where like that I don't want to get too psychoanalytic, but like this is a thing where like Bob has learned absolutely nothing. Like he's correctly identifying that like this is how marketing works. Like, you know, divide and conquering, establish an identity for your product. Correct. But now literally all Bob does online all day is like play cheerleader for different brands and products. Like, you know,
Exactly.
Marvel, the good ones, like Captain Marvel, the good, cool one with the kick-ass girl, bad DC Comics with Zack Snyder with the toxic masculinity and evil, not good. Like all he does is perpetuate that same shit all day, but for superhero movies. And it doesn't seem to like click with him that like he's perpetuating this in any way, that this like consumerist like
I think he knows,
I don't know,
but he doesn't care. So like literally the next sentence, but it was the great console war of the 90s that first drew me into that kind of corporate manipulated madness. As the new decade dawned, Nintendo had released the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. I got mine for making it out of 5th grade without a single grade below C. Ah, the triumph of lowered expectations.
the king of Brainland, people.
Yeah, I have to make a point of that every time he brings it up because, as we've mentioned before, Bob has a sort of weird intelligence-focused eugenics thing going on Twitter.
Yeah.
Maybe we're being unfair. Maybe Brainland is just anybody who can do 5th grade without hitting a D. Like, it's very, very tempting.
As long as they like Black Panther.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a...
All right. So, what did you want to say about this, Kay? Because otherwise I'll continue to the next point.
2 things. One small thing is right before the subheader, A Boy Goes to War, we have actually our second instance of this is the beginning of the end. The first one is, I think, in chapter 1 when he talks about Sonic being invented. So this is the beginning of the end of Mario's hegemony in the world.
Agreed. Oh, not just in general.
So this is the second beginning of the end. And the nature of that end comes a little later in the section, I think.
Yeah.
Because what we learn in this, and this is sort of end of page 35, start of page 36,
Right.
is that my man peaked in like 5th grade.
Yeah. Oh my god! Can I read the whole thing?
Yeah, I think you know the section. Go for it.
Yeah, I've got it highlighted.
Yeah, do it.
It was the 90s. Video games had, quote, arrived as the coolest ticket in popular culture. The arcades were in the midst of a brand new boom driven largely by a new generation of more violent games aimed at teenagers. Mario and Nintendo were the acknowledged kings of video games, and Bob Chipman, formerly Bob the Dork who's way too into his dorky video games, was now Bob the guy who knows everything about the world's hottest new pastime. Quote, "Why, yes, ma'am, I can tell you the best place to build up your EXP in Final Fantasy. What's that, sir? You can't quite make it through TMT2? Let me show you a code that might help. Pathetic fantasies, even for a 10-year-old. That's really how I figured things were going. Hell, maybe that's how they were going just for a moment. But that moment, my moment, didn't last."
I really love 10-year-olds enjoying toys. Pathetic.
His fantasy was like that someone would ask him about this, that someone would be like,
Oh my!
it would be like, God, where's the best place to build up my EXP in Final Fantasy? How can I
know that. I know that. Oh my God! Yes, I will be your husband.
Oh my
I know
God!
I had that recurring dream where I'm at the UN and like the diplomat from the USSR says, "You can't beat Super Mario Brothers 2 in less than 10 minutes," and then I do it and I stop nuclear war.
But like, it's so fucking dramatic. Like, it's so apocalyptic. It's like, that's really how I figured things were going. Hell, maybe that's how they were just for a moment. But that moment, my moment, didn't last. It's just like this guy's fucking talking about like fucking Vietnam or something. It's just like,
No, I wrote in my notes, Bob has PTSD from the console war.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump ahead too much, but he will later refer to the console wars as his own private Vietnam. So
About that.
that's on page 41. I've got it in my notes. That is very relevant. He's so grizzled by this whole event. It's fucking awesome.
Oh,
Bob
my
is
God.
Soldier 76, but for Mario.
Okay, page 37. But it didn't matter. Sega wasn't selling games. They were selling a label, a shoebox-sized hunk of plastic and microchips that said you were on the cool team. Nintendo, playing the long odds, did themselves no short-term favors by maintaining a strict, family-friendly, quote-unquote, image, just as violent games were becoming the rage in arcades. When it came to port Mortal Kombat to home consoles, they handed Sega another mother of all PR victories. When Nintendo opted for a bloodless, censored version, while the Genesis offered an authentic translation, just like that, my life was the ending of a downer Twilight Zone episode. Video
What?
games were in, and I was still out for a brand new reason.
oh my God.
Like, no Wikipedia page entry has things like this. Like, he fucking compares his life to a Twilight Zone episode because violent games got popular.
Oh my God. He's so fucking victimized by everything that has ever happened to him. It's incredible.
My next note is on page 40. Did you have something to say, Kay?
Hold on. I have something on 38 where he's talking about the Mario movie. Is he still talking about it on 40? I think he goes on for a while.
He pontificates about the Mario movie and how it is going to be the most important movie of all time for quite a while.
My note starts on page 38. It just says, remember to talk about how unhinged he is about the Mario movie. So let's get into it.
This is the time.
I have the exact same note. It says, the Mario Brothers movie really fucked Bob up.
It really did. It really did.
So Bob loved the Wizard.
He did.
And loved the Mario TV shows, but hated the movie. He was like 12-year-old.
He loved the movie. He loved the movie, and he twisted his brain into knots to try and convince everyone he knew that it was actually a really good movie because he couldn't accept the fact that it was dog shit.
Do you want to read part of it, Kay, on page 38?
I don't have like a specific quote until page 40. I just wanted to tie it into what was just being said. I hope I'm not stepping on your feet here too much, Alton. Just
no, I only have a quote on page 40 as well.
Okay. Well, just on page 40, in relation to him, like basically just huffing copium and being like, "No, the Mario movie's good, honest."
Is it the second to last paragraph?
Yes.
No.
Really? Oh.
Hold on. I'm gonna let me read it here a bit. It's a horrible movie. Stage-bound, badly acted, nonsensical, and cheap-looking, even for 1993. Years later, it'd come out that the production was so badly managed that the actors threw out their scripts and everything just started getting worked out as they went. Hoskins and Leguizamo would go on to publicly trash the film, which bombed at the box office, and it felt like Matha's career never fully recovered. As of the writing, she most recently featured in the box office stud Atlas Shrugged Part 2. Naturally,
Wow.
I convinced myself it was good. Not only good, but great. I reviewed it positively, in much greater detail, and to much more positivity than it deserved for the school paper. I zeroed in on the good stuff. They eventually wore the right colors. Live-action Yoshi, that dinosaur humanoid evolution business was kind of interesting, wasn't it? There was a Babam. The ending promised a sequel, but I didn't wait around. I made my own, animated via D-Paint on my old Amiga, imagining of how the plots of SMB2 and SMB3 might be adapted into the movie's universe. I needed it to be good, because I needed Mario to be as big and as meaningful a movie franchise as he'd been in gaming. Getting a, quote, the movie was forever, and it meant that the character and story mattered beyond being some brief fad. Mario was not a pet rock, damn it. He was my friend, and the thing that was getting me through the misery of pre-adolescence. I needed him to matter so that the time and energy I'd invested into him mattered. But the film was a big flop.
A bad movie that died a quick box office death and heralded a run of awful video game based movies, Double Dragon, Street Fighter, etc., of which the so-so Mortal Kombat was the only thing close to successful, financially anyway.
Oh my God.
The movies and movie audiences had spoken. Video games, even Mario, weren't ready for the big leagues, and eventually even I had to admit it. It was a harbinger. Things were changing, ellipses, and not in a good way.
Oh man, would you say it's the beginning of the end?
I think it was the beginning of the end. That is so fucking funny.
It's
Mario
awesome.
is my friend, damn it.
There's two things I wanted that got in that bit that got read out there. First of all, again, he takes the misery of childhood as like a given. He talks about the misery of pre-adolescence. Like, that's not Bob. Again, seek help. Don't try to subvert your fucking therapist this time.
Yeah.
But also, a huge revelation is made on this page, which is that he began his career as a film reviewer at his school paper by defending just indefensible corporate garbage and insisting that it's actually good, which I just think you can draw some conclusions about his overall career trajectory and behavior based on that. I think that rules. That's all.
Even children who love everything,
Right.
hated the Super Mario Bros. movie. Like as he says in the book, and was my experience at the time. It was just everybody was pretty hyped for it, and then we're just like, oh, that sucks. On to the next thing, I guess. We're children. Who cares?
Right. Well, it's like one of the things specifically is that he was obsessed with it. He wanted it to be a repeat of his experience with the Wizard. He wanted to be surrounded by like even more like diehard Mario fans, and wanted to be this cultural moment that he remembers from, I guess, like what, 4 years earlier?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's to his credit in a way, the way he just openly admits he needed that pop culture experience to justify the time that he invested it. He can't just say, oh, this is something I like. It has become my identity. And rarely do you see people just spell it out in those terms that they're saying. They try to, couch it in, oh, I think Marvel is better because of the inclusion and the special effects or whatever. He's just saying, I love this shit because I need to love it. Others need to love it. Otherwise, who am I?
He really lets the mask slip here.
I feel like he doesn't. Sorry, I feel like he doesn't think that's a bad thing. That's where I get concerned. That's all.
Oh yeah.
He never really. I don't think he ever really evolved past this. This is the age of like adolescent obsession with these things. In fact, it seems like he didn't recognize that what he had with this brand is essentially an unhealthy relationship, and instead he spends an enormous amount of time trying to recapture these moments of his childhood as an adult, which is very unhealthy. And just to get more, I found the bit where he talks about the wizard, so I want to read this part on page 39. All right? I was like, no, I told myself. It'll work. It'll be good. They have to change some things to make them work with real actors. This is the Mario movie. And the Mario movie will be great because it deserves to be. Why would they make it if they didn't understand that? I read everything I could about it, which in those days meant magazine articles that recycled the same handful of publicity stills and self-serving quotes from the filmmakers. I convinced myself, in spite of the natural inclination towards skepticism that infused every other aspect of my life, that this was going to work. That in spite of all the revisions, was it really that different from the Koopalings having been different names in the SMB3 cartoon? This version of Mario would simply be epic and awesome. Ellipses. Just in a different way. It had to be. It just had to be. That's what I told myself.
This is a fucking shooter's manifesto.
I know. It's a fucking scene from like, oh my god, what is that movie called? The Shining, where it just it has to be good.
You like roll up the typewriter, like Shelley Duvall's looking at the typewriter, and it's just this book, and your like eyes go wide.
Yeah, it's like Super Mario Brothers the movie is a good film. Super Mario Brothers the movies are a good film. All right, let me continue. It just had to be. That's what I told myself as a friend and I headed in to watch it opening weekend. Ellipses. Somehow managing not to register that neither the celebratory atmosphere that had surrounded the wizard nor the large crowds for the same were decidedly not present. How could I notice anyone or anything else in the world that day? I was going to see the Mario movie. I was going to see Super Mario Bros. The movie.
Hey, what movie were you going to see, Bob?
Oh my god.
That's his attitude going into it. He had been obsessively working himself up in like an insane amount of hype before this movie even released. And he was like, and like exactly what I said, he compares it to The Wizard and how it was like, how that had this celebratory atmosphere and these huge crowds. And this is like one of the few times where Bob Chipman felt as one with pop culture, that the world was in tune and he was like singing the same song as everyone else. And now this is his evidence of how he's living in a bad Twilight Zone episode where he wakes up one day and he's like, what? The Super Mario Brothers movie isn't good?
I hesitate to reveal that I've read this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. This book, I think, would be a good like double feature, whatever you want to call it, to Elliot Rodgers' manifesto before he killed all those women. Because I have read it, and most of it is him complaining about World of Warcraft and how... and you know, Pokemon, and then in the last 20 pages he's just like, oh yeah, by the way, I hate my sister, I hate women, Chads always rip on me, I'm gonna do my shit. But I feel like maybe that's what's missing from Movie Bob's book, is that we've yet to get to the crime he'll eventually commit.
Doesn't it feel like it's missing a segment where he goes, and this is why our culture has become degenerate, and here's what I'm gonna do about it? Like,
yeah, I mean, those are his tweets. That's the
missing
his tweets
component.
are the epilogue to the book.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have the capacity to perform actions, so we're never gonna have.
God.
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but here is page 41. Things fall apart. Every single one of these is like fucking apocalyptic like headings for these different sections. It's like
The day my life ended.
40 pages in, talking about the book more than it took longer than it took him to write it.
in my memories, the great console wars dragged on like my own private Vietnam. And it didn't help that I was still constantly in trouble at school and in and out of therapy for anger, attention, and authority issues.
got authority issues because he only recognizes the leadership of the Mushroom Kingdom.
Wait, so who in the Mario Kingdom is Ho Chi Minh?
Sony PlayStation, apparently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because it's just like in 1994, the Sony PlayStation came out. Unlike other countless third challenger consoles before, it stuck around. The war was now more of a scattershot fracas. And since this was the booming Clinton economy, it was less unusual to see more than one brand of console to a household, particularly since Generation NES was speeding towards young adulthood with pockets full of their own disposable income. So then he's like, the identity conflict of Mario versus Sonic gave way to a maturity conflict. Sony, the first successful challenger from outside the gaming-only business, built the PlayStation. Later on, he's just like, still having your SNES plugged in, you might as well still be sleeping with a teddy bear.
Oh, beta.
That's
So it's just
right.
like every single like iteration post NES and SNES for him, it's just like this humiliation at the hands of pop culture writ large, because gaming as an identity moved on from Mario and into the sort of more toxic areas of being like obsessed with maturity as an art form, which in, you know, the 90s and PS1 era was basically just having guns and boobs.
Yeah. Also, I feel like there's a bit of sort of defensiveness coming through as well. It's like, no, I'm not an underdeveloped baby man for still liking Mario at my age. I don't have any notes till 44, so push ahead.
I mean, he at the end of 41, he basically just says, like, what makes it especially rough is that how true that symbolism actually was. To be a geek about anything user requires a level of investment that originates in childhood, meaning that geek culture is largely a culture of people holding on to vestigial pieces of their own childhoods, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically like the thesis statement of this book, right? It's just like Bob Chipman as a person is just like constructed psychologically of vestigial pieces of his childhood he's been clinging on to for like 40 years.
Yeah. Bob, tell it to your therapist. I'm begging you.
Yeah, I mean,
he outsmarted him.
You got to find a therapist who you can't outwit immediately, Bob, with your big brain.
Hold on, I have a note from 43 real quick, which is
Okay.
So he has like a mini episode because in Yoshi's Island, Baby Mario and Baby Luigi are revealed to be from the Mushroom Kingdom and not from Brooklyn, New York, and not actually Italian plumbers, and he can't wrap his head around the fact that Nintendo doesn't actually give a shit about Mario lore the way he does. But he says, I didn't have a breakdown or anything. It's not as though I was knocked into some kind of system shock over this, but the dissonance stuck with me for a while. By now, I had more important things to worry about in school and life, to be completely consumed by college prep classes, girls, sex, drugs, and social hierarchy were giving me a headache. And I just like to say, Bob, no, none of those things were giving you a headache. You did not have to worry about girls, sex, or drugs.
Let's go ahead and get to page 44.
There's a moment vitally important in the development of any geek, nerd, or whatever else you want to call it, when it finally sinks in all the way that the people creating whatever character or property you've let colonize a part of your imagination just aren't as devoted to it as you are. That to them, it's a job. For me, this was it. How much sense did it make to be trying to work out the bigger relationships between the characters and the broader scope of their world? What was the point of keeping meticulous mental and, yes, also physical lists and chronologies of Mario's friends, enemies, worlds, abilities, all that? What did it matter if I could point out on a moment's notice that Nokobons, exploding shell troopers, were only found in Sarasaland and only in one game? Why should I put so much of myself into this when Mario's masters couldn't even keep his origins straight?
The inside of Bob's room looks exactly like Charlie Day's room in It's Always Sunny, with just little bits of Mario and string wrapped around it and going everywhere.
Pepe Sylvia. Oh my god, I'm 100% with Bob Chipman on this one. Decolonize the Brainland. Get those fucking Koopa Troopas out of the Brainland.
Land back, but only for Mushroom Kingdom.
we're decolonizing the Brainland, which is what I've decided to call the landscape of Bob Chipman's mind, and that I think he should honestly sue Nintendo for damages. The permanent psychological harm from being obsessed with their shitty fucking games.
Bob Chipman put on a Virtual Boy one time, and then Lawnmower Man happened to him.
But then it's basically like, thankfully, out after that, it's that he basically says how he's sort of like shook off the obsession, which I'm very grateful for, and that finally realizing that the people making the games did not give a literal shit about the greater lore.
Yeah, because listen, and this speaks to the problem with this premise for a book. It's just Mario. Like, there isn't like I attack him for not like doing what I would consider like a serious analysis of the text, for, you know, all this talk about how deep his analysis is going to be, but there's not much to analyze in Super Mario Brothers 3. It is not a rich text with a lot to chew on as a critic. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you would need like
an
understanding of the history of platformers and like the industry at the time, and you could probably like talk about like what it led to. But like Mario 3 is really fun to play. I don't think about Mario 3 afterwards. There's so many other Nintendo games, however worse they are, like their jankiness or like weird presentation, there's more to talk about. And there's something that I'm sure there was already, everything that was already needed to be said about Mario 3 was already printed before Bob wrote this.
Yeah, it's not a thinker, you know?
He basically says that in the introduction. He's like, it's such a popular thing, it's been so widely covered. But obviously, I think that there was no better man for the job than Bob Chipman.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, like I hate to play devil's advocate with Bob here, but it's clear he just kind of like shit this out and then didn't really do much with it. I mean, I don't know. Maybe he did Conqy at the time. He was all about promoting this book, but this was just like like a live journal entry. He needed to just
basically
have a hard copy.
While you chumps were reading the digital copy, I was reading my signed physical copy that I got from him in person in a comic book store in Somerville.
Holy shit.
Davis Square. So
you have a signed copy?
Is that real?
Yes, this is real. Yes.
Oh my god.
I'm not joking. I really have it.
Yeah, I mean, see that's the other side of it. If he's signing copies of a live journal entry, we get to roast it. Like, if
the only person there too to get a copy, so other people have read this, presumably.
I mean, yeah, of course, other people have read this.
If Alton, if you came across my like 25-year-old live journal entry where I like am openly weeping about Final Fantasy, I expect you to just be like, "Ooh, man, this is embarrassing for Reese. I'm gonna just close this and never mention it again." Which is, and that's I think the proper way these things should be dealt with. But Bob, you just had to do it.
I'm gonna be asking you to sign it, bud.
This is a terrible book about Mario, but it is a incredible book about Bob Chipman.
Absolutely.
This if you are like us and you have the horrible brainworm that makes you obsess about Bob Chipman's terrible tweets, you will love the part 2 of this book, because listen, there's some fucking gems in here, and like let's go ahead and get back into it, unless you had something to say, Conqy.
Oh, I was just going to say, on the physical copy, they obviously put like zero effort into printing it because it's printed on like the cheapest newsprint imaginable. And there is no bleed in the book at all. So like the text starts at the edge of the paper. Like there's no margins at all.
Oh my God.
It's just,
that sounds
it's
awful.
It is awful. This is printed by Fangamer for some reason. Right. Back in 2013, when Fangamer was like a relatively new company, and I went on Fangamer's website before we started recording just to see if they still sell it, and they don't.
No.
Yeah.
Can't imagine why. So this book is, I guess, an out-of-print lost gem that you can only get if you subscribe to Scribd, or if you're a complete freak like me who still has a real version for some reason.
I have to ask, Conqy, why did you get it in the first place?
So this is my horrible secret is I used to like Bob's videos. I liked his movie reviews on The Escapist way back in the day. Like I thought they were like pretty okay. I also hadn't been exposed to a lot of like genuinely good media criticism yet. This is like when people were like watching like the Nostalgia Critic, where like the height of review comment like comedy was like I'm a guy who like hates your favorite movie from when you were a kid and I'm gonna shoot it with a gun. That's the video.
Dark times.
Yeah, dark times of media criticism, especially because
that's the era that I know Bob from as well. And I thought Bob was a embarrassing but unremarkable figure at the time with videos that weren't like absolutely insane criticism. It's like I could see his video on the Ghostbusters and be like, okay, that's a Ghostbusters video, not like some of this other shit.
Yeah, the thing is, like, the game, like, his, like, movie videos were, like, okay, and, like, the big picture on The Escapist was, like, it was fine. The Game Overthinker was pretty bad, but it wasn't any worse than, like, 90% of what you found on, like, Channel Awesome, because 90% of Channel Awesome also sucked.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't going as ham eugenicism either. It was there, but it wasn't, like... the Trump fueled tweets.
Yeah,
I think he just didn't have Twitter.
Trump basically broke this guy's brain.
Yeah, that's true. He did get a lot worse. Most libs did at that point.
Are you guys ready to return to the text?
Let's return to
text.
Yes.
Okay, so page 45. This is just part of the drinking game, so let me just read through this. Super Mario 64 was, of course, a thing of beauty. No challenger to SMB3 in my heart, of course, but a worthy successor. If Mario's side-scrolling had peaked for me with the Tanuki suit, then SM64 would be fine as the first lunge into a new era. It was the first time in forever that a game was so aesthetically comfortable. I was desperate to not finish it, just making Mario run and jump around the elaborately constructed game world, exploring every cave and scaling every tower just to see what might be found. In my youth, I wanted nothing more than to spend hours simply inhabiting Mario's world, and now I could. And if such a massive undertaking as this, the game world was unprecedentedly huge for the time, was merely the first step, one could only imagine what might come next. Let the others have their undoubtedly short-term fads of raiding tombs and crashing bandicoots. Mario was back, and this was, we were sure, the future, ellipses. But... in reality, it was the beginning of the end.
Oh, God. for somebody who claims to love Mario, his writing about Mario is so fucking bland. This is the most insipid shit I've ever heard. I'm squeezing my skull right now. I don't know what else to do with my hands and body. I just want to crush my brain.
Yeah, again, he says nothing of substance about Mario in this entire fucking book. It's all the interesting bits are about him.
Exactly.
And his psychology.
This is the second time he says specifically it was the beginning of the end for Mario. And the first time was, of course, when he said it about the fucking Sega Genesis. Which
this is the third time.
Third time?
The first time was the existence of Sonic in Chapter 1. And then the second time was the console wars. And then this is the third time.
Oh my god. It just like there's no editing in this book. And like I know I said I wouldn't harp on that, but the fact that he uses the beginning of the end twice. Let me fucking like search this. Oh my fucking god. Life in Wartime, page 18. Oh my fucking god. This was the beginning of the end for Mr. Miyamoto's plucky plumber as the unquestioned king of all video game heroes. Oh my fucking god. And then on 35 it says actually it was beginning of the end. Oh fuck. God.
Yeah.
Recording this is the beginning of the end.
This is the beginning of the end of Reese's sanity.
So the first one was because of Sonic coming into existence, and then the second one was because he wasn't going to be the special boy who knew about video games for very long, I believe.
Oh my god. It doesn't matter. It happens 3 times, and it's like, how many fucking beginnings does one end need?
3, I guess.
That's a pretty profound question beyond the scope of this podcast.
Damn true.
Okay, so I'm super fucking hyped. My next note is on page 49. And this is
Yes.
an incredible fucking... I never fucking knew. This is the best fucking story.
Bob is fired for truth.
Oh my god. All right, so... Okay, so who wants to read this? Do you want me to read this, or Conqy, do you want to read?
Yeah, let's fucking go. All right.
Go ahead.
You got it.
Meanwhile, my second blockbuster job led me to what seemed at the time like a stroke of great fortune. An older gentleman, who will remain nameless, came in asking if he could leave some flyers. Turns out he was starting up a film criticism show for local cable access television and was looking for on-air talent. Store policy said that I had to tell him no, but it said nothing about me volunteering for the position myself. And after a set of meetings and conversations, I was hired to do the show along with this person and a female co-host. The resulting show was what you'd expect from local cable, but it was exposure and a chance to work on my craft, such that it was. I was the colorful member of the team, the younger guy with the wild opinions and the deeper film knowledge. It was a fun time while it lasted. I've never gotten much of a sense that anything was especially off about the guy running the show. I knew he was fairly conservative politically, ex-military and an ex-cop, but it had never come up in any kind of negative way. But upon the release of Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ and the controversy surrounding it, something seemed to change in him. I was fairly certain both co-hosts knew that I'd seen the film and hadn't cared for it, and expected it would make a good show when we sat down to review it. Instead, I got a phone call and an unnervingly scary life experience. My employer, though for the record I wasn't technically being paid for my services on the show, summoned me into a, quote, meeting in his van in an empty parking lot early in the morning. He did freelance security work, or he said he did at least, and it was on the job. This set off more red flags than I could count, but I showed up to meet him. He presented me with a printout of a scathing blog review I'd posted after seeing the film the first time and wanted to know what I had against Jesus Christ.
Quote, unquote.
Unwisely, quote unquote, Jesus Christ. Unwisely, I offered that my objection was to the anti-Semitism in the film and was told that, quote, those people had Schindler's List. Now this is our turn, unquote. I was then told that he would be using the Passion discussion as an occasion to promote the film's, quote, positive message, and that if I wasn't go along by saying I liked the movie, my time on the show would be over. And that was that. I never heard from the guy again, but I know his show didn't last long without me. I'm told he'd behaved in a manner, parentheses, because it's hearsay, I won't get into specifics, that disturbed the production staff during the taping of the Passion episode, and that my name had come up, which had me walking around a little bit more paranoid for a few weeks, but nothing ever came of it.
That is it's so fucking funny. Like, this motherfucker dedicated 4 pages to nothing. Oh, but like, like the fact that one of his ex-employers was a fucking insane conservative chud who fired him for not liking The Passion of the Christ. Holy shit.
This guy has the most Catholic PTSD of all mankind.
Yeah,
Oh
this
my
is
God.
the big moment where I really feel for Bob, though, because that guy sounds fucking terrifying. He's like, come meet me in my van.
This story is incredible. If the whole book was like this, I would like give it a 5-star rating.
Oh,
Like-
hell yeah. Oh, my God.
Unwisely, I offered my objection to the anti-Semitism in the film and was told those people had Schindler's List. Now this is our turn.
Those people. Oh, my God.
Incredible.
Oh.
Bob, you can come on the show. I'm not a regular host. I don't have the authority to offer you this, but I'm saying come on the show and tell us this story in person. We'll have
Holy
you. Come on,
shit.
let's do it.
Man, I'd be tempted.
I feel like that's the inevitable trajectory of this podcast, right? Eventually, Bob Chipman is going to somehow end up on the show.
As a permanent co-host, and we just
He's going to be the 4th co-host.
oh
No, this is not going to be happening. I will do battle with Bob Chipman.
He's going to fucking execute him.
I have a sword. I have access to a sword somewhere.
oh my god.
Those people had the game over thinker. Now we have video god Watteau.
This is our turn.
Oh my God.
Okay, so I have like one more note, and then I have a fucking huge rant.
Okay, let's
All right.
do it.
All right, so on page 51, there's nothing particularly interesting. There's only one interesting thing here, and that I have this marked in my notes as Bob describes a Game Boy like the One Ring. All right, so let me go ahead and read through this on page 51. And it was during one such jaunt of casual browsing that something extraordinary caught my eye. Boxes labeled NES Classic, with vintage-style cover art advertising that they contained direct ports of NES-era games for the Game Boy Advance. The presence made me smile, but then I'd gotten used to the idea of the Golden Age ports on new systems. What I saw next to them, though, would have induced an honest-to-God spit take if I had been drinking anything at the time. A Game Boy Advance SP if you want to be technical about it, painted in art designed to resemble an NES. I had to have it. Impulsive, yes, but I was unable to resist the opportunity to carry the good old days in my pocket. Now, I needed game.
He's such a fucking consumer. Like, it looks
he
like
is.
the thing I like. I gotta buy it.
Our consumer, our boy.
What I managed to miss during my break, quote unquote, was that while Mario and the rest of the Nintendo menagerie had slipped from the top shelf of the console scene, their power and influence had grown 1,000-fold in the realm of handhelds. I gorged myself on such games, discovering to my delight that the persistent tech limits of small handhelds meant that this particular gaming landscape was awash in polished continuations of my beloved 8 and 16-bit eras.
He's like a fucking Mongolian conqueror drinking like wine from the skull of his enemies.
And there were Mario games, lots of Mario games, re-releases of the classics, the 2 LAN titles I still had from before, and even Mario and Luigi's Superstar Saga, Game Boy Advance, and soon enough a DS, was my constant companion, particularly useful for passing time sitting in the car after work, waiting for the rest of the house to go to sleep before heading home. Ellipses.
What?
Wait,
Why would you
what?
admit to that in a printed work?
I promise that last part isn't actually as sad as it sounds. You see,
Oh
I
yeah,
don't believe you.
I take your word for it.
around this time, I had picked up another hobby, making silly videos on the internet. And basically, he was saying that the only time he could record those videos was when his family was asleep. So he would just sit in the car after work, playing his DS until everyone in his house was asleep, and then fucking recording his videos at like
That makes it more sad.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
in the morning.
Yeah, if it would be way less sad if he was just like, "I loved the night" and didn't explain it any further.
That would have been awesome.
And then he goes on to say something like, I was getting pretty good at cutting together silly mock trailers, but I had far greater amusement watching the more polished shows other guys are putting out. James Rolfe, another aspiring movie maker, was transforming into an internet age celebrity as the angry video game nerd. Almost overnight, establishing excitable Gen Xer rants about obscure stuff from her childhood as the most popular web video genre going. A few years later, a British-born Australian gamer named Yahtzee Croshaw became overnight the first superstar video game critic when his hilarious, insightful, and mercilessly objective animated review show Zero Punctuation was picked up by an online game magazine called The Escapist. I'd like to say I saw my future then, ellipses, struck by visions of a new path forward by a beam of sunlight down from the heaven. But the truth is, I didn't have the slightest inkling that I might have stumbled into a useful career outlet for both my, thus far, useless multimedia film studies degrees and my gradually reawakening video game fixation.
Amazing. I just want to say, this guy's use of ellipses is driving me fucking crazy.
I know, right?
There's another one like at the end of the paragraph.
Yeah, and then something started to stir. ...
So, how old is Bob at this point? Because he's living with his parents still, and he's finished university. Is my understanding.
Hang on, let me open my calculator up
Oh
real
my
quick.
God.
Okay, so he's 29. He's 29.
My
Wow.
God.
My parents would not have let me stick around that long.
Yeah.
I guess good for him. I guess you can have it's easier probably to have a fake job like making video reviews online if you live at home.
What was I doing at 29? I think I lived with my partner, and I think I worked at a greeting card company.
What was I
There you
doing
go.
at 29? Nothing. I'm 28.
Oh fuck! Don't make me feel old.
Wait, Alton, are you only 28?
Yes.
How are you fucking married? Sorry, I don't. Your life is a big enigma to me.
It is very mysterious. Maybe I should write a book.
Yes.
Perhaps about your relationship with Sonic the Hedgehog. And
That's
then you
right.
can be
I was like, I never fucking played
enemy.
any Sonic the Hedgehog games. The end.
No, it would be the Morrowind. I
Exactly.
don't know. Jump by jump.
Cliff Racer by Cliff Racer. My life in the Vardenfell Kingdom.
At least you could talk a little more about Morrowind. It benefits from having like dialogue,
A story that
a story.
somebody actually gave a shit about, and like
There's a
consistent
little more.
lore. Not like a story dictated by fucking translators who didn't give a rat's ass about the continuity of the series, much less like the creators.
Yeah.
All right, so this is my rant. On page 54, I was inspired to finally say something about this shit, because like at this point, I've just gotten fucking sick of Bob's writing. So here we go. Bob Chipman is a capable writer, but not a good one. Writing involves more than just being able to put words to paper. It involves curation of the ideas presented as well. What I mean by this is that Bob Chipman excitedly spends an entire chapter telling us about the fucking Wii having successful sales like we give a shit, and only a couple paragraphs on the local cable access show run by a crazy religious psycho. I mean, which one of those would you rather read about? He cannot tell which things to actually focus on to make it an interesting book. Between that and saying shockingly oblivious things like comparing a movie release to 9/11, I think I finally figured out what's wrong with Bob. He's got he's got terrible third-person perspective. He cannot like conceive of any of his thoughts or actions from somebody else's perspective.
Personally, I view Bob as a very mediocre writer, because to me, the most engaging element of writing is editing.
Right.
And that is something that Bob has been unwilling to do. And the only reason his videos come off better is because he is willing to go through that process somewhat, just by a video needing some editing.
Right.
It's dreadful, but it is very instructive to see somebody even have like very interesting revelations about this stuff, but have no interest in applying it to their lives. And that's what's so interesting to me about this stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree with Reese that this book was never edited at all. Like, I think that the closest thing to editing that Bob did was maybe running like a spell check on it once before he shot it off to the publisher, but he never reread it. As soon as the words hit the page, he forgot about them and moved the fuck on. And this is the first draft that we're reading. There was no second draft. There was no like copying and pasting and moving sentences around. Like, the words came out of his brain and onto the page like a stream of consciousness, and then it immediately ink on paper, ship it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, an editor would have caught a lot of just like the weird writing, a lot of the repeating himself, and just I mean, an editor might have told him just don't publish this at all, but you know, they could have helped a bit.
Well, like a psychiatrist, an editor would have been defeated with facts and logic. So.
I've been reading books about editing. I know your tricks.
Yeah, I've been studying editing flaws so I can argue against them.
Well, you studied editing. I studied the blade.
Oh my god. Oh fuck. And so like it really just fucking got to me how this guy spent like an entire chapter talking about how successful each fucking Nintendo console was, which is just such a waste of time. Like, who cares that like the Wii was a successful console? Who cares that it like came out of left field to become like the biggest release? It's like, it's not relevant to the story you're trying to tell.
You know what that is? That's fucking Reddit shit. That's like what like nerds on the internet do when they try to prove that their console's the best. Like, oh well, did you know that the Sony PlayStation outsold the original Xbox, and I've got the sales numbers to prove it. It's that same shit.
But like, what really gets to me is that like he spends longer talking about this shit that nobody cares about, when like on page 49 he has like the most interesting story I think I've ever heard Bob Chipman tell. Like, that's fucking fascinating. Like, working at like a public access television show run by like a right-wing psycho. Like, surely you could wring more out of that than just like 4 paragraphs.
Yeah, I want to hear more.
Yeah.
It's the only thing in this book I want to fucking hear more of. Right?
Exactly.
How long are we recording part 2?
Part 2 has been going on for an hour and 5 minutes.
Jesus Christ.
I fucking know.
I'm gonna give my little spiel about Bob.
All right.
And then I'm gonna start drinking more beer and perhaps doing other drugs because my brain can't handle it anymore.
We'll take a break and do part 3, and that'll be it. We have to finish this in part 3, or else we will go insane.
All right.
There's enough for a part 3, at least funny shit.
Okay.
Our 5-hour movie Bob struggle session.
Yeah, seriously. My rough spiel about Bob is that what's interesting to him about me is that he is open enough in a way that it makes his lib tendencies interesting, because you can kind of see the origin in this, giving himself over to the culture and to this very shallow culture where it's all about that immediate moment of loving Mario, and that's just his life forever. And even realizations about the potential badness just like don't have any impact, just bounce right off, even if he's aware. And I feel like that is such an interesting mirror to his like virulent Elizabeth Warren worship, his just worship of that kind of like blue check lib shit that he does, where it's just like Bob believes in nothing except for the basic, narcissistic, I believe I'm smarter than you, despite the lack of evidence that might be the case. So I also am more ethically strong than my critics. And I think that is, you can't maybe extrapolate that to everybody who supported Elizabeth Warren, but I think you can. It's interesting to me to just like see where people who have that kind of like political instinct come from, because it's clearly like what everybody who's like that believes. It's like they're not making any kind of real thoughts or decisions. It's just like all like programmed in from before, and their life has not been challenged enough or examined enough in any way to like push past to like anything real politically. I don't know. That's been my thing with Bob.
So you're saying that he has got like, he's established in much the same way that he's had part of his brain colonized by Super Mario, that he's sort of had his part of his identity sort of pre-formed for him by like the political mainstream and like the narrative that like the media puts out about like these different candidates.
Exactly. And it's like, I don't mean to make it only about electoralism, but I think that is the most, relevant to Bob part of it, is that, it gives him a mommy like Elizabeth Warren where he can, just give himself over. And then, that's his identity. Now he gets to justify it by arguing about it online with people. And I think
I love
that
giving
is
myself over to mommy.
To Bob Chipman, the 2020 like primary was just another console war, basically.
No, it really was for him. Like in a way, like, he's incapable of like breaking out of this cycle of convincing himself that like these terrible things are actually good. Like, no, the Mario Brothers movie has to be good. Elizabeth Warren is like the most qualified woman since Hillary Clinton to run for president. She has to win. Like, everyone has to see it, right? Of course they do.
Hillary
Why
won.
wouldn't they? Yeah, exactly. Like, it's all fandom shit for him, and it's him like, you know, tying his identity to a fandom, whether it be political or whether it be consumerist.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I just think in general it's like good. It's good for me to see someone like Bob and be like, oh, I just don't have to acknowledge or talk to any of those people at all, because we see through Bob's book that it's just like we will never reach any of these people. Maybe some people are more reachable than Bob, but it's like, you know, there's this kind of narcissism at play that you'll never be able to reach through the screen and deal with.
Yeah,
well, you'll never be able to reach Bob because it's his job not to be reached now. He's got the blue check next to his name. His livelihood is tied to this and this ideology.
And Bob is probably the most discussed person on Kiwi Farms. Like, Bob is roasted on a level that we cannot even fathom by all parts of the internet. You know, there's nothing that we can do to stand out, even though he will name search us and yell at us.
Yeah.
Roasting movie Bob is the true horseshoe theory.
I think we should mention that, like, fucking, as we were like reading this book, all I said was that I was, I like just mentioned. Oh, let's see if I can find this fucking tweet.
Oh, I forgot that he yelled at you. Oh,
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh my god. How did we? Yeah, we have to talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay, well let's start part 3 with the yelling at Alton.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Where we all yell at Alton.
Exactly.
Are we going to talk about chapter 2 anymore in part 3, or should we wrap it up now?
I think we still have things to go through. So unfortunately,
Yeah, there's a bit.
we didn't finish chapter 2. There's going to be a part 3. Holy shit, you guys! This is a Herculean task.
All right, I think we'll go through the second half of the book quite quickly, so it
Exactly.
we should
Like,
be able to do it.
After section 3, there's just little individual funny moments I picked out. I hope you guys enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone will see you in part 3. Bye bye.
You better thank us for this,
Yeah,
you little fuckers.
Exactly.
This is self-harm.
My Lisa stands full trip, and I'm rejuvenated and I'm remixed. I took plane, trains, and automobiles, and for real got ill. In Brazil, I'm the Wizard of Oz while on tour, and got war in Singapore, and I'm eating sushi in Japan, but there ain't no place like Super Mario Land. There ain't no place like Super Mario Land. Check this out.